Hey guys, it's Michael and today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout tag. This is a tag to basically overview how your reading year is going, and if you watched my last video, which I will link up here, you will know that my reading year is not going great. So to answer the first question, how is your reading year going? I would say not great, but not the worst. So far, I have mostly been reading 3 and 4 stars, and just a lot of books that haven't really stuck with me, that have been quite forgettable. But the few books that I have loved, given, you know, high 4s and 5s, have really stuck with me. So I'm stuck in a place where it has been successful because I have some new favourites, but also the majority of the books I'm reading aren't very good. So this is the stack of books I have read this year. I will hold them up without trying to drop them. Minus 2. I've got 2 at my flat. The 2 that are missing are Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, as well as Up at the Villa by someone? You'll see it here. But the first question is the best book you have read this year, and I'm just gonna grab it from the stack. If you watched last week's video, then you will know that In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado is one of my all-time favourite books. I read this for one of my university courses and it absolutely blew all of my expectations away. This is a fairly hyped book and it seems to be for a good reason. This is a interestingly told memoir in which Machado uses the metaphor of a dream house as a space where her abusive relationship can exist and take on multiple different forms in order for her to process the trauma of it, but also to educate other people. She writes about the history of queer relationships and abuse within those relationships and how it has historically been handled, as well as just queer representation in general, whether it be in Disney villains or Disney movies or fairy tales, and it was just honestly such an enthralling read. I have never read a book quite like it. Whilst this is a very serious subject matter, there is quite a playfulness to Machado's tone. There are lots of different techniques that we would normally see in like a fiction novel, such as like an unreliable narrator, metafiction, or just different genres represented in this non-fiction book. And every time I think about this book, I still find new things to love about it, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. This is likely to remain my book of the year, but I am really excited to read her short story collection, Her Body and Other Parties, which is like a fiction short story collection. So, you know, hopefully if I love this one, I will love the other one as well. The next question is the best sequel that you've read this year, and I haven't read too many sequels, but if you know me or if you follow me on social media, you will know that Robin Hobb is my gal. The Farseer and the Realm of the Elderlings series is just my shit. I am at heart such a fantasy buff. I haven't been reading too much fantasy, but I did read Blood of Dragons, which is the conclusion to the Rainwell Chronicles. If you did not know, Robin Hobb is the creator of The Realm of the Elderlings, which is a 16-book series comprised of 4 different trilogies and quartets to make up the 16 books. And this is the final book of the 3rd and penultimate series in the overall series. I've just said series like so many times. I don't currently have my copy of the 1st book in the overall series, which is Assassin's Apprentice, but to briefly explain, it follows a young boy called Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king in waiting. He is raised in a castle and trained to be an assassin for the royal family, because he's in quite a unique position where he's like raised partly as a commoner because he's a bastard, but also he has royal blood, so he can be used in multiple different ways. And you just get so attached to Robin Hobb's characters. It almost feels like quite a long, drawn-out coming-of-age story. But where we are now in the story, things have completely changed. You know, there's much more magic involved. It is very much a slow build. Lots of world building, lots of character development, you know. This book wasn't my favourite overall. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5. This series, The Rainwell Chronicles, hasn't been my favourite. I have done some reading and apparently there were some publishing issues with this series. I think the main one is that it was published under young adult. I don't know why, considering the rest of Robin Hobb's books are very clearly adult. So for this series to be young adult just doesn't really make sense to me, and it kind of takes away from some of the Robin Hobb magic that I've been used to. But I've also read that the books were supposed to be combined into a duology, and that is very evident because the first and third book of the series very much read like the first 400 pages of a really long fantasy book, which then results in the second and fourth feeling very rushed and action-packed and not really like complete books. With all that said, I still did really enjoy this series, and I really do appreciate what it's added to the overall world and scope, and I'm really nervous for the final trilogy, which I'm hoping to read by the end of the year. Next up is your favourite reread, and I haven't actually reread any books this year, but if there was one I was to reread, it would probably be the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings. I feel like if I end up finishing the series, I would quite like to revisit the first trilogy and just see, you know, any foreshadowing or just how things have come full circle. So yeah, that would probably be my reread of the year, but it just hasn't happened yet. Next up is the genre that you've been enjoying the most or just reading the most of, and I would have to say that it has been it's definitely been literary fiction, but I do feel like all of the books that I've loved the most have had a sort of weird element to it. Take, for example, I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is definitely a literary fiction novel, but there is a weird dystopian sci-fi element to it, which gives it that edge that I can really appreciate. And sometimes a literary fiction novel just like isn't enough for me. Sometimes I need a little bit of fantasy, I need a little bit of weirdness, some sort of fantastical element to get me a little bit more intrigued. Although I do really love some contemporary novels and some realistic novels, it kind of just is what I'm in the mood for. I'm just in the mood for weird literary fiction. Next up is a new release that you haven't gotten to yet. There is one book that I was planning on picking up, but I honestly never got the chance to, and that is A Day of Fallen Night, which is the sequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, which I'm pretty sure I read last year and only gave 3 or 4 stars. And it is a high fantasy 800-page standalone, but now it is a series, but each of the books are standalone, so it's like a standalone series. I don't have too much of an idea what A Day of Fallen Night is about, but I did really like the world of The Priory of the Orange Tree, and for about half of that book I really did think it was going to be my new favourite fantasy book. I really would like to give Samantha Shannon another shot because I really do also want to read her Bones season series, but I really did enjoy The Priory of the Orange Tree, at least the world and the characters and the writing. Just something about it. By the ending I felt it was a little bit rushed, even though it was 800 pages. The ending did feel quite rushed to me because we'd had such like a long 600-page build-up, and then everything kind of wrapped up too quickly in the last 100 pages. So yeah, I would really love to give A Day of Fallen Night a shot. Let me know if you've read it and how it compares to The Priory, because I would be quite interested to hear your thoughts. Next up is an anticipated release for the next half of the year, and again, I haven't been keeping on top of what is coming out and what has came out, but I really would like to start reading books by Mona Awad, and I'm pretty sure that she has a new book coming out that I'm pretty sure is called Rouge. She's the author of Bunny and All's Well, which are 2 books I have been dying to read for so long, but then again, because I haven't been buying books, I haven't really found the chance to buy them. And then, you know, I've got all of these books that I need to read, 90 to be specific. So yeah, my Mona Awad journey is coming. I might actually do a little reading vlog maybe when Rouge comes out and I can read all 3 in the same vlog. That would be fun. So yeah, I would say Rouge is definitely one that I'm keeping my eye on, and I'm excited to see what everyone thinks about it. Next up is my biggest disappointment, and sadly it has to be Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I bought this at the airport when I was going on holiday to Florida, and I remember being so like engrossed in the first 100 pages of it. We're basically following Cleo, who falls in love with an older man called Frank in New York in the early 2000s, I'm pretty sure. And it's kind of just about their relationship and how it affects the people around them and also them. The dog is joining. Hello. Are you saying hello? I just felt a little bit misled by this book because I was expecting a much more in-depth, kind of normal people-esque relationship, and it kind of just felt a little bit flat. And I also did feel like the chapters from outside perspectives, from like Cleo's friends or Frank's friends, felt a little bit redundant, and ultimately this book was just a little bit disappointing. But I must say, I really did enjoy like the first half. The second half, I just kind of felt a little bit flat. Next up is my biggest surprise, and this is another book that I read for university, and that is The Good Soldier by Ford Madox Ford. When I describe this book to people, I kind of compare it to The White Lotus, except it's set in 1914, I'm pretty sure, or just after the war. But this book basically follows these two couples who are vacationing together, and they just become quite friendly with each other, and just kind of all of the drama, murder, affairs and stuff that happen with them. This book features one of my favourite tropes, which is the unreliable narrator. We don't know if Dowell, the main character, is actually telling the truth. He's writing direct to the reader, and he kind of recounts the tale, but there's a few discrepancies, there's a few mistakes, and he says even himself sometimes he's not sure if that's actually what happened. And this was just such a fun read and a really good book to study as well. Next up is a new favourite author, and I have to say Sequoia Nagamatsu with How High We Go in the Dark has really got me excited for whatever they write in the future. This was featured in my last video if you want to hear some more thoughts on it. But it is basically a set of loosely linked short stories set around the pandemic. You know, the before, during and aftermath of the pandemic. And this book made me laugh, cry, and basically just experience every emotion under the sun. I'm just editing this video and wanted to say that How High We Go in the Dark is not about COVID pandemic, it is about a fictional Arctic pandemic. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. My best comparison for this is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, although I actually much preferred this to Station 11. Station 11 is not short stories and is much more like, has a more clear plot, whereas this just felt very slice of life for lots of different characters, and I just really appreciated that. The next question is a new favourite character, and unfortunately I don't really have one that sticks out in my mind, but The Good Soldier, the main character Dowell, being quite a contriving, unreliable narrator, is one that really stuck in my head, and I ended up writing an essay on Dowell. And yeah, I would say not a favourite character, but definitely the most interesting one, and one of the most fun to follow. Next up is a book that made you cry, and my mum gave me this book quite a long time ago and said it was one of her favourite books, and it is Cain and Abel by Jeffrey Archer. And she was like, be prepared for the waterworks, and whilst I did tear up quite a bit, I didn't sob. I haven't really cried at any books this year besides this one. We're basically following Richard Cain and Abel, who are kind of brought up under really different circumstances but end up being rivalries in like the economic world in Boston and New York, spanning from just the First World War up until like the 60s or 70s, I'm pretty sure. And this was quite a book to read. It kind of just follows how these two men's lives intertwine throughout the courses of their lives and how they grow to hate one another. And it is a really bittersweet book, and I can understand why my mum said it was one of the saddest books she's ever read. But I don't know, just something about this book, I think it might have honestly been a lot of the kind of business economic discussions. Like there were a lot of like chapters and chapters of just like economics, which I study English, why do I want to read about that? I get how it's integral to the story, but that was the only kind of thing that lessened my enjoyment of it. But otherwise this was a really compelling saga with a lot of really memorable characters as well. This stack is just getting lower and lower, but the next question is a book that made you happy, and I have to say that was Mythos by Stephen Fry. Almost forgot his name. This, if you did not know, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what this book is, but it is just Stephen Fry's tellings of multiple Greek myths. As you can see, I've got a few tabbed. This was hilarious. I would definitely recommend the audiobook for this. It feels like you're being told a story in such a funny way. His humour doesn't take over the myths, but it is really well executed and feels very refreshing to some otherwise dark and disturbing tales. This is the first book in a series of like recountings of the Greek myths, and this kind of follows the early ones, you know, the creation and, you know, the Olympians. One of my favourite myths is Pandora's box, or Pandora's jar as it's called, and I also really love the myth of Eros and Psyche, or Psyche. I'm not sure if it's Psyche or Psyche. But yeah, I really loved pretty much all of the myths in here. As you can see, I've got a few tabbed, as I said already. But yeah, this is a book that I could reread and reread and reread because, you know, these are just timeless stories, but they're told in such a refreshing way. Next up is the most beautiful book you've either bought or received, and as I said, I haven't bought too many books, but I did get quite a few for my birthday, and If I Had Your Face by Francis Cha is such a gorgeous cover. I love this yellow, I love the flowers and the faces, and I don't know, I really love this cover. This book follows 4 women in Seoul and how their lives sort of change and interact and intertwine, and I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to get to this. I would like to get to it by the end of the year. It seems like quite a quick read, but this doesn't have the best reviews on Goodreads, which I know obviously isn't something to go off of, but I feel like when I see like an average rating for a book, it kind of dictates how excited I am and how quickly I'm going to get to it. But let me know if I should make this one a priority if you've read it, and if you have read it, or if you've liked it, disliked it, heard of it, liked the cover too. Yeah, just let me know. We've come to the last question of the video, and that is, what are some books that you need to read by the end of the year? As I said earlier, I really would like to get to Her Body and Other Parties by Cameron Maria Machado, which I own, so that's great. Hopefully going to get to that very, very soon. I'm also really excited to get to Pachinko, which I was given for my birthday. It is quite a daunting book, and I know it's going to be quite emotionally taxing, so I'm kind of trying to decide when the best time to read that is. But yeah, hopefully I'll get to that by the end of the summer, because I am really wanting to read that. I also, as I said earlier as well, would like to finish off the Robin Hobb series, and I also really want to get to Project Hail Mary at some point this year by Andy Weir. I haven't read The Martian. I'm not sure if I should read that first. I know they're not connected, but I would quite like to read The Martian, so maybe I should read that first because it came out first, just, you know. But Project Hail Mary is kind of like an artificial intelligence book, I'm pretty sure, about this man who is like stranded on a spaceship and everyone else has died. So it's quite long, but I would really like to get to this because everyone was ranting and raving about this book when it came out, and I feel a bit late to the party, but hopefully I can get to it sometime soon. So yeah, this is my slightly leaning tower of books from 2023. I hope you've enjoyed this mid-year book freakout tag. Let me know some of your favourite books of the year, some of your most disappointing, some new releases that you're reading. Let me know, because I feel a little bit out of the loop, because I have really just been tackling my backlist TBR. But I really would like to get caught up on some new releases, so let me know some of your favourites down below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye.